And he turned around and looked at me, and he said he was going to go in the bathroom and read. And I said, okay. And then that was when he walked into the bathroom.
He left the stage nearly 5 decades ago, but the echoes still haven't stopped. Whispers, headlines, accusations, some loud, some quietly buried, have tried to shape the final chapter of Elvis Presley's life. But what if the truth didn't come from a book or a bodyguard, but from the one person who was with him when the curtain truly fell? Now, after years of silence, she speaks, not to relive the fame, but to reclaim the man behind it. There's one detail in her story that flips the entire narrative, and it's not what you think. Before the myths settle for good, Ginger Alden is setting the record straight. You're about to hear the version no one expected. Night, everything changed. On the early morning of August 16, 1977, the quiet inside Graceland gave no immediate indication of what was about to unfold. Ginger Alden, Elvis Presley's 20-year-old fiancée at the time, had spent the night with him as he prepared for his upcoming tour. Elvis was reportedly in good spirits, discussing future plans and appearing more energized than usual. According to Ginger, he mentioned wanting to play racquetball and had spent time exercising and laughing just hours earlier. When the time came to rest, he picked up a religious book, told Ginger he was going into the bathroom to read, and said plainly, "Don't fall asleep in the bathroom." Those would be the final words she ever heard him speak. Ginger stayed nearby and eventually dozed off, unaware of how much time had passed. Around 2:30 p.m., she noticed the unusual silence and went to check on Elvis. What she found was devastating. Elvis was lying face down on the bathroom floor, unresponsive. His shoulders and upper chest touched the ground, his legs were bent, and one cheek rested on the tile. She gently lifted his eyelid and saw that his eyes stared ahead, unmoving. In her memoir and interviews, she has described this moment as one of total disbelief and shock. Despite what she saw, there was still a flicker of hope that medical help might save him. Emergency responders were called, and Elvis was rushed to Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis. But attempts to resuscitate him failed. Ginger, along with Elvis's father, Vernon Presley, and others close to the family, gathered in grief. The official cause of death was later declared to be cardiac arrhythmia. However, the circumstances sparked widespread speculation about the role prescription medications may have played. Ginger herself admitted in later interviews that Elvis had developed a reliance on sleep aids, packets she had seen left for him on occasion, but she wasn't fully aware of their contents at the time. The events of that day left Ginger permanently marked. In those final hours, she wasn't just the woman who found Elvis. She was the person he had trusted most, the one he intended to marry. While rumors and contradictions followed in the years after, Ginger has consistently described that morning with clarity and restraint. The world lost a cultural icon, but she lost someone she deeply cared for. Her account, decades later, stands as one of the few first-hand perspectives from the inner sanctum of Elvis's final moments, moments that remain both private and profoundly public. What happened next wasn't just unexpected. It rewrote everything Ginger thought she understood about love, fame, and the man behind the legend. A love that moved too fast. Ginger Alden's introduction to Elvis Presley was not planned for her. It was initially meant for her older sister Terry, who held the title of Miss Tennessee in 1976. The invitation came through George Klein, a close friend of Elvis, who reached out with a request for Terry to visit Graceland. But curiosity got the best of the Alden family, and Ginger accompanied her sister to what they thought would be a one-time visit. For Ginger, who grew up in Memphis and frequently passed Graceland as a child, Simply stepping inside Elvis's home was surreal. What began as an innocent visit would quickly shift into something unexpected and intensely personal. When Elvis entered the room that evening, Ginger didn't expect him to single her out, but something between them clicked almost immediately. He wore a blue karate-style top with black pants, different from the highly stylized image the public often saw. Despite being shy by nature, Ginger was the first to greet him, blurting out a casual "hi," which seemed to break the ice. Elvis, who had already learned their names from those downstairs, made everyone feel welcome. However, it was Ginger who left a stronger impression on him. By the next evening, she was invited back alone. That visit marked the beginning of what would become a fast-developing relationship. Elvis invited Ginger into his bedroom suite and began sharing more personal parts of his life. He turned off the television and declared, "Television destroys the art of conversation," despite having TVs all over the house. That night, he played music for her on his electric organ, talked about his cars, and eventually suggested they visit one of his airplanes at a private airport. What Ginger thought would be a quick tour turned into a spontaneous flight to Las Vegas. Elvis reappeared on the plane with pajamas in hand and announced, "We're all going to Las Vegas." It was Ginger's first time traveling west, and it marked the start of a whirlwind romance unlike anything she could have imagined. Within just a week of that spontaneous trip, Ginger found herself joining Elvis on tour. Their relationship intensified quickly. She wasn't just a guest anymore, she was now a steady presence by his side. Despite the glamorous settings, private jets, lavish suites, and concerts, Ginger says there was also an emotional immediacy between them that made their bond feel real. But such a rapid and intense beginning also raised questions. Was it passion or impulse? Was Elvis seeking companionship to fill a void? Regardless of the answers, their story had begun, and it was moving faster than anyone expected. The proposal few ever heard about. Elvis Presley proposed to Ginger Alden on January 26, 1977, just months before his death. The moment was deeply personal and took place not in front of cameras or in a grand setting, but inside the private sanctuary of his Graceland bathroom, a space Elvis considered sacred. Ginger had been sitting in his daughter Lisa Marie's room when Elvis quietly disappeared. Moments later, he returned, took Ginger by the hand, and led her into the lounge area of his suite. There, he knelt before her, presented a ring, and asked her to marry him. Ginger described the scene as emotional and genuine, filled with kind and heartfelt words. The engagement ring Elvis gave her was a significant piece, a large ornate diamond ring that reflected his style and generosity. In later interviews, Ginger would display this ring with pride, calling it one of her most treasured possessions. Though their relationship had only begun months earlier, Elvis seemed serious about building a future with her. In fact, Ginger has revealed that Elvis was already planning their wedding in detail, including choosing her dress and discussing public announcements. He told her he wanted to make the engagement official on stage during an upcoming Memphis concert. Elvis's vision for the wedding was specific and ambitious. He had spoken to designers in Los Angeles to begin preparing a custom wedding dress for Ginger. According to her, Elvis wanted the gown to feature delicate rosebuds with gold thread woven into the fabric. He also wanted her to wear glass slippers and a tiara, elements that mirrored a kind of fairy tale ideal. Ginger believed Elvis intended the wedding to be a major public event, possibly even televised, emphasizing the words, "the wedding of the century." This fantasy-like vision shows how seriously he took their engagement, even though it remained largely private during his lifetime. While some might question whether the wedding would have actually occurred, Ginger maintains that Elvis was genuinely committed to their plans. She stated that they discussed having children and creating a life together away from the pressures of constant touring. The suddenness of Elvis's death meant that none of these plans would come to fruition. Still, Ginger continues to emphasize that the proposal and the future they spoke of were entirely real. To her, it was not a symbolic gesture or temporary affection. It was a promise of a new chapter that was tragically never opened. Inside Elvis's private world. Beyond the stage persona and screaming crowds, Elvis Presley lived a private life marked by routines, eccentricities, and moments of quiet reflection, parts of him few people ever saw. Ginger Alden, who spent many of his final months by his side, shared insights into this lesser-known world. She recalled how Elvis often stayed up late into the night, engaging in long conversations about philosophy, religion, and life. He loved to read and would sometimes sit quietly with a book in hand for hours. Despite the chaos of fame outside Graceland's gates, Elvis valued stillness and personal connection. He once told Ginger, "Television destroys the art of conversation," even though he had multiple TVs around the house, suggesting a desire for depth in a life surrounded by distraction. Elvis's charisma wasn't limited to his public performances. According to Ginger, he had a unique way with words, able to take ordinary or even difficult subjects and speak about them in a way that felt deeply poetic. He could make anything ugly sound beautiful, she said. Whether he was talking about life, music, or spirituality, Elvis spoke with intensity and passion. These late-night talks, often held in his suite or his office, created a sense of intimacy that Ginger described as meaningful and emotionally revealing. To her, he wasn't just the king, he was a thoughtful, at times restless man, grappling with the same existential questions as anyone else. His lifestyle reflected both indulgence and seclusion. Elvis was known for his love of spontaneous outings. One night, taking Ginger to see his private plane, only to declare moments later that they were flying to Las Vegas. This impulsiveness was matched by an obsession with control and routine. Graceland was his fortress, and few were allowed to enter certain parts of the house, particularly around his upstairs bedroom, which remained off-limits to the public even after his death. The second floor of Graceland, including the area where he passed away, remains closed to this day, preserving that sense of privacy he guarded so fiercely. To those who only saw the glittering costumes and electric performances, Elvis may have seemed larger than life. But Ginger's account paints a different picture, one of a man who cherished quiet moments, guarded his inner circle, and longed for honest connection. His world, while rich in fame and luxury, was ultimately defined by the simplicity of personal rituals, music, conversation, and trust. These were the pieces of Elvis's life that few witnessed, but that Ginger insists mattered most to him. The kindness the world didn't see. Elvis Presley's generosity has long been the subject of admiration, but few people witnessed it as closely or personally as Ginger Alden. During their time together, she saw firsthand how freely he gave, not just to those he loved, but often to complete strangers. Elvis didn't seek praise for his acts of kindness. In fact, he preferred they remain private. Ginger recalled moments when Elvis would impulsively buy someone a car or help pay off a debt without ever asking for recognition. To him, these gestures weren't about image. They were about doing the right thing when someone was in need. Among the many tokens Elvis gave, Ginger's own necklace held special meaning. It was inscribed with the letters TLC, short for Tender Loving Care, a symbol he often gave to women in his life, while men in his circle received TCB, Taking Care of Business, pendants. For Elvis, these were more than just initials. They represented a personal code of loyalty, love, and responsibility. Ginger wore the necklace proudly, not because of its material value, but because of the message behind it. It was a quiet way of saying she was part of his inner circle, a group he guarded closely. Elvis's kindness extended far beyond material gifts. Ginger remembered how thoughtful he was when it came to her family. In a touching detail, her father had actually met Elvis decades earlier during the singer's military induction. Ginger's father, who worked in public relations and recruitment, was present when Elvis was drafted into the U.S. Army. That brief encounter came full circle years later when Elvis began dating Ginger. Elvis made a point of acknowledging that connection, treating Ginger's family with familiarity and respect, something she deeply appreciated. What Ginger continues to emphasize is that Elvis didn't give for show. He gave because he felt compelled to help, often moved by stories of hardship or injustice. Whether it was gifting a red Porsche to a co-star or quietly ensuring someone had a place to live, Elvis acted quickly and decisively. Ginger believes this side of him was often overshadowed by his fame. Yet to her, it was one of the most defining aspects of who he really was. The world may have known Elvis as an entertainer, but Ginger insists that at his core, he was a man who cared deeply and gave without hesitation, even when no one was watching. Behind the generous smiles and spontaneous gifts, there was a pressure building, one that no spotlight could soften. The weight of fame and its toll. Despite his iconic status, Elvis Presley struggled with self-image and the pressure of constant public scrutiny. Pressures that Ginger Alden observed closely during their relationship. According to Ginger, Elvis was aware of his changing appearance, particularly his weight. He once acknowledged to her that he felt he was gaining too much, and it bothered him. Ginger noted that while he sometimes looked bloated or heavy, especially in photos or on stage, much of it was due to fluid retention and inconsistent eating habits. In reality, she said, he was not fat, but sensitive to how the public perceived him. These insecurities were exacerbated by the intense attention Elvis received on everything from his performances to his health. Ginger tried to encourage healthier habits. She introduced more nutritious food options into his diet and urged him to stay active. Occasionally, he responded positively and showed interest in improving his lifestyle. However, his routines were often hard to change. Elvis would go through phases of overeating specific foods, sometimes obsessively, and then abruptly shift into restrictive periods. These patterns weren't just about diet, they were symptomatic of a deeper emotional struggle. The highs and lows mirrored what Ginger described as a persistent inner conflict. For someone idolized by millions, Elvis still seemed to wrestle with his own self-worth in private. Beyond physical appearance, Ginger described a man who experienced profound loneliness. Despite being constantly surrounded by staff, fans, and friends, Elvis often felt emotionally isolated. He was guarded, unsure of whom to trust, and rarely let people see his vulnerability. Ginger became one of the few people he opened up to. She recalled late-night conversations where he shared fears, doubts, and a longing for a more meaningful, stable personal life. Fame, while offering adoration and material comfort, had come at the cost of personal peace. He missed having genuine connections without the filter of celebrity expectations. This emotional weight, compounded by years of being in the spotlight, was a burden Elvis carried quietly. Ginger's reflections paint a picture of a man worn down not just by the demands of his career, but by the emotional fatigue of living a public life. In the end, the loneliness behind the legend was something few understood. While fans saw a superstar, Ginger saw a human being trying to find balance in a world that rarely allowed it. These struggles, she believes, were just as significant as any external issue and offer important context for understanding the complexity of Elvis Presley's final years. Truth behind the medications. During the months leading up to Elvis Presley's death, Ginger Alden began noticing a consistent, troubling presence in his daily routine. Small, folded napkins or envelopes, which she later realized were filled with prescription medications. These packets, as she came to call them, were left for Elvis by his staff, typically without much explanation. At the time, Ginger says she didn't fully understand what was inside them or the extent of the issue. But she did grow increasingly concerned. In hindsight, she has acknowledged that the medications were central to the deteriorating aspects of Elvis's health, even though he often appeared functional and composed. Ginger recalled moments of tension when she confronted the situation directly. On one occasion, she questioned why the packets were always around and asked what exactly he was taking. Elvis, defensive but not aggressive, would usually brush it off or say that he needed them to sleep or relax. To Ginger, the answers felt vague and unsatisfying. Still, she admits she was in denial at the time. She didn't want to believe the man she loved and planned to marry was dependent on a potentially dangerous cycle of prescription substances. Her love for him may have clouded her perception, making it difficult to see the depth of the problem as it was happening. The line between medical treatment and dependency was increasingly blurred, not just in Elvis's life, but in the culture surrounding him. According to Ginger, it wasn't just about Elvis requesting medication. Many people around him were complicit in enabling the habit. Doctors, staff, and inner circle figures often provided medications without adequate scrutiny or safeguards. Ginger later realized that what seemed like casual medical support was, in fact, a system that allowed for unchecked access to powerful substances. While she didn't consider Elvis an addict in the traditional sense at the time, she now believes that the environment around him fostered a form of dependency that went largely unchallenged. Looking back, Ginger regrets not acting more forcefully. She wonders if questioning the use of those packets more persistently might have changed the course of events. Her reflections are not centered on blame, but on understanding. She emphasizes that Elvis was not reckless. He was trying to manage stress, insomnia, and physical pain. But the method became dangerous. The medications were legal, prescribed, and normalized in his circle, yet ultimately part of what contributed to his decline. Ginger's account brings to light a nuanced reality, that Elvis's struggles with medication were not hidden in darkness, but quietly present in plain view, misunderstood, enabled, and tragically underestimated. The storm inside the king. Ginger Alden's time with Elvis Presley revealed not only his charm and generosity, but also moments of deep emotional instability. One of the most disturbing memories she recounted was a sudden and uncharacteristic outburst during a private disagreement, in which Elvis struck her across the body with a hand gesture that shocked her. Ginger was stunned, not only by the physical impact, but by how quickly his mood had shifted. It wasn't something she had ever expected from him. While this incident raised serious questions, she has consistently stated that she does not believe Elvis was abusive by nature. Instead, she saw it as an expression of emotional distress rather than cruelty. Elvis's temperament could fluctuate dramatically. According to Ginger, there were moments when he seemed distant, irritable, or overwhelmed, followed by periods of warmth and affection. These emotional swings, she believes, were not merely personality quirks, but signs of deeper psychological struggles. The intense pressures of fame, combined with declining health and overexposure to medications, likely played a role in his instability. Ginger often walked a fine line, trying to support him while not provoking further distress. She describes an atmosphere at Graceland that could turn tense without warning, shaped by Elvis's moods and his need to stay in control of his environment. Another concerning aspect of Elvis's behavior, Ginger recalled, was his fascination with firearms. He often kept guns nearby, even inside his bathroom or by his bedside. One particularly dramatic incident occurred when Elvis, frustrated over a malfunctioning toilet, pulled out a gun and shot it. No one was harmed, but the act was unsettling. For Ginger, this episode highlighted how Elvis's stress could manifest in dangerous ways. She noted that his relationship with guns was not about violence toward others, but seemed tied to control and impulse, a symbol of frustration rather than a real threat. Despite these troubling moments, Ginger remained committed to portraying a full and honest picture of the man she knew. She emphasized that Elvis was not a violent person at heart, but someone wrestling with emotional burdens he often hid from the world. In her view, these moments of volatility were cries for help rather than signs of inherent aggression. She believes the public has long misunderstood or sensationalized such stories without recognizing the pain that often lay beneath them. Ginger's account, while candid, urges compassion, reminding us that even icons are human, and that fame doesn't shield a person from mental and emotional turmoils. Misunderstood in life, misrepresented in death. In the years following Elvis Presley's death, a number of narratives emerged that, according to Ginger Alden, did not align with the man she knew. Among the most persistent misconceptions was the idea that Elvis had given up on life, that he was deeply depressed, withdrawn, and waiting for the end. Ginger has firmly rejected this narrative. In her account, Elvis was actively planning for the future in the final months of his life. He had mapped out tour dates, discussed new film projects, and talked openly with Ginger about having children together. Far from someone resigned to decline, she says he was looking ahead with purpose and energy. One of the most painful elements for Ginger came in the aftermath of Elvis's death, when the media began to frame him as a fallen star, whose final days were marked only by addiction and despair. A central source of this image was the controversial book Elvis, What Happened?, written by three of his former bodyguards, Red West, Sonny West, and David Hebler. Published just 2 weeks before his death, the book portrayed Elvis in an unflattering light, focusing on alleged excesses, erratic behavior, and illegal substance use. Ginger has called the book both misleading and opportunistic, arguing that it deeply hurt Elvis and did not reflect his full humanity. Ginger maintains that the Elvis described in those posthumous accounts was incomplete and distorted. Yes, he struggled physically, emotionally, and spiritually, but he was not broken or hopeless. She emphasized that during their time together, Elvis talked often about goals, family life, and spiritual meaning. He had even gone so far as to consider television appearances and expanding his public engagements again. Ginger believes the more tragic interpretations of his life gained traction because they fit a dramatic, marketable story arc, not because they were accurate. She has spent decades watching others profit from skewed portrayals of a man who, in her view, was complex, but still vibrant when he died. For Ginger, the damage of these misrepresentations extended beyond Elvis's legacy. It also erased the life they had begun building together. She lost not only a fiancé, but a vision for the future that included shared plans, conversations, and dreams. The public might remember a legend fading in the spotlight, but Ginger remembers a man still trying, still hopeful, and still reaching for something better. Her decision to speak out, even decades later, was driven in part by the need to challenge these incomplete portrayals and offer the world a more honest, balanced view of the man behind the myth. As the noise of false portrayals grew louder, Ginger knew silence was no longer an option. A legacy she refuses to let die. For many years, Ginger Alden remained largely silent about her relationship with Elvis Presley. Despite being his fiancée at the time of his death and a direct witness to his final moments, she avoided the spotlight while others published books and appeared in media to speak on his life. Her eventual decision to share her side was not driven by profit or fame, but by a desire to preserve what she saw as the truth about Elvis's character and legacy. A key influence in her choice to come forward, she has said, was her son. As he grew older, he began asking questions about Elvis, and Ginger realized how important it was to set the record straight, not only for him, but for history. In interviews and in her book, Ginger emphasized that her goal was not to idolize or excuse Elvis, but to provide a more complete view of the man he truly was. She spoke of a deeply spiritual individual who searched for meaning, wrestled with personal demons, and showed immense generosity behind closed doors. Her mission was to counter the image of Elvis as merely a cautionary tale, a man lost to fame and medication, and instead highlight his capacity for love, thoughtfulness, and sincerity. To Ginger, Elvis was not defined by his end, but by the complexity and humanity of his life. Ginger also expressed concern about the commercialization of Elvis's legacy. Over the years, she watched as narratives were shaped for entertainment or financial gain, often stripping away nuance in favor of more sensational angles. In her view, this did a disservice not only to Elvis, but to the people who genuinely cared for him. Her testimony pushes back against the version of events circulated by those who were no longer close to Elvis in his final months, reminding the public that not everyone who spoke on his behalf had witnessed the same side of him. She believes her experience, being with him intimately until his final day, gives her a unique responsibility to speak with honesty and dignity. Ultimately, Ginger's account is a defense of legacy, not just memory. She believes that preserving the integrity of Elvis's image is about more than setting the record straight. It's about honoring the man she loved. While acknowledging his flaws, she insists those do not outweigh the depth, intelligence, and warmth he showed in private. By finally telling her story, Ginger Alden hopes to restore balance to the public understanding of Elvis Presley, not as a tragic figure consumed by fame, but as a person who lived, dreamed, and mattered far beyond the stage. It's a portrait shaped not by tabloids, but by the quiet, everyday moments only she witnessed. In doing so, she reclaims not only her voice, but a more human version of Elvis the world rarely saw. In the end, her story isn't just about Elvis. It's about love, loss, and the right to remember someone on your own terms. Thanks for watching. If this story gave you a new perspective, don't forget to like, leave a comment, and subscribe for more untold truths and exclusive insights. Got thoughts or memories about Elvis? Drop them below. We read every one. And don't miss what's coming next. Click the video on your screen now to keep watching.